This is Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Let's get into it. You shall appoint judges and officers in all your towns that the Lord your God is giving you, according to your tribes, and they shall judge the people with righteous judgment. You shall not pervert justice. Guys, that is Deuteronomy 16, verses 18 and 19. We're so thankful for all of you listening to the show, and always, we're very, very thankful to our donors. If you're not aware, we are a donation-based ministry, so if you wonder how we can put out the podcast, the forging table, all the stuff we do on social and all those types of things, it's because we have donors just like you guys that are a part of what we're doing here, and so those are the $10 a month guys, $50 a month guys giving one-time donations. Go to our website, Undaunted.Life/donate, or you can just go to the link in the show notes. And while you're listening to the show, how about you go and leave us a 5-star review? So on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to this, leave us a 5-star review. But I do have an announcement here from the very beginning, and I've been having to keep this one under wraps for a couple of months, so I'm very, very excited about it. We have a partnership agreement with Daily Wire, and specifically Daily Wire Plus. So you're going to be hearing us talk a lot about Daily Wire here specifically this month with all of our different podcasts. You probably heard the ad on Tuesday's show with Joby. But, for me personally, I've been consuming Daily Wire content. It kind of started with Ben Shapiro stuff. This would have been before the 2016 election. And so I've just been consuming Daily Wire stuff for a long time. At first, I became a Daily Wire Plus subscriber just because I wanted to help them and all the stuff that they were doing. But, they have given me a lot. So from their articles on their website, from the stuff on Daily Wire Plus, all the streaming content, the movies, the series, and things like that. Me personally, I've benefited very much so from all of that information because it's helped me kind of solidify some of my conservative philosophies, consuming this stuff from all of their different, authors and podcasters and things like that. So it's really, really, really been helpful for me. And so we have a opportunity for you guys to get a Daily Wire Plus membership at a discount. So if you're not familiar with All Access, that's the All Access version of Daily Wire Plus. You get a whole bunch of stuff with it. You get live Q&As whenever they do them with Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, Jordan Peterson, all those different types of folks. You get access to all their documentaries. So that's like What is a Woman and Am I Racist by Matt Walsh. You get the entire Jordan Peterson library. So this is his new parenting series, which is great. Exodus, the Gospels, and he's got a lot of other different series on there as well. And then you also get uncensored access and ad-free access to all the Daily Wire podcasts. You get all the articles from dailywire.com because some of them are behind the paywall. And for you parents out there, BentKey, that is their children's content app. So it's got children's movies and children's shows on there. And these are shows that you can put your kid down in front of and not be worried that they're going to be giving them LGBTQ plus propaganda and giving them kind of left-leaning talking points. And you have 2 gay dinosaurs that have like a surrogate, egg baby or whatever. You're not going to have to worry about that. So you get access to BentKey. You get 2 free Leftist Tears tumblers, and there's a whole lot more that you get with that whole thing and with the subscription there. But for you specifically, if you want to become a Daily Wire Plus All Access member, all you got to do is go to the website that is in the show notes, okay? Or I'll just spell it out here. It's getdwplus.com/undaunted. So that is getdwplus.com/undaunted. And then you just go to the link there or the link in the show notes and then use this promo code Kyle30. So that's my name, KYLE and the number 30, KYLE30. You're going to get 30% off of your subscription. So again, guys, I use Daily Wire all the time. I watch the stuff on Daily Wire Plus all the time. You guys should become members. I think it would be tremendous for you, for your conservative values, for building out your philosophies. I think you should do that. Again, use the promo code Kyle30 when you click on the link. So today, we're going to be talking about in the quick hitter section, the 12-day war with the U.S. and Israel versus Iran, New York City likely electing a bona fide communist to be their next mayor, Muslim fundamentalists killing over 200 Christians in Nigeria, a child therapist pleading guilty to distributing videos of infants being raped, the American Medical Association doubling down on their commitment to transing the kids, the UK decriminalizing abortion, a U.S. Congresswoman using her baby boy as a prop, me landing in Instagram jail, and then also the lesson we can learn from the Oklahoma City Thunder winning the NBA championship. But first, we're going to be talking about the 3 branches of government, which if you ask random people on the streets that went to public school, they probably don't know what those 3 branches are, but there's obviously the executive, the legislative, and the judicial branches. But over the last, I don't know what you could say, certainly the last 10 years, but maybe 20 years, there's become an outsized importance and gravitas given to the executive branch right? A lot of things kind of revolve around who the main executive or the president of the United States is going to be. And that's to the detriment of the legislative branch. Again, Congress does not really have high marks when it comes to the public. People don't like the Senate. They don't like the House. There's too much logjam, which was kind of the point from the beginning from the founders. But you've seen the legislative branch come down in importance and the executive branch be elevated. But potentially the biggest fight inside of our country is how the judiciary is going to be used. Because specifically people that are on the left side of the ledger, they know that they're going to have a lot of left-leaning judges that are going to allow them to do the things that they want to do in order to basically affect the culture and affect everything going on in this country in kind of a top-down manner. Now, if we go all the way back, I've already mentioned the 2016 election earlier in this podcast. Let's go all the way back to that. Yeah, Donald Trump running against Hillary Clinton. And as I've said many times on this show, I did not vote for president that year. I left the top of my ballot blank because I did not think that Trump nor Hillary Clinton met my basic standards of human decency, and I didn't think either one of them would govern conservatively. And I remember having a conversation with my Uncle Dan before the election, and he goes, Kyle, I understand, Trump's got, his foibles, he's got his warts and all those different things, but the Supreme Court is way too important. And I was like, yeah, but this, and yeah, but that, and I kind of meandered around. And then lo and behold, Uncle Dan was right, because Donald Trump got 3 appointees to the Supreme Court of the United States during his first term. Okay, he got Neil Gorsuch, he got Brett Kavanaugh, and then he ended with Amy Coney Barrett. Okay, so obviously this had huge ramifications and continues to have huge ramifications because those 3 joined the 2 other reliably conservative justices in Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito, and then one kind of squishy centrist in John Roberts. But together, those 6 people, they make a semi-reliable conservative majority with Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, and hilariously stupid Ketanji Brown Jackson making up the staunchly, reliably leftist, liberal, activist minority of the Supreme Court. Now, the importance of the conservative majority Supreme Court has been on full display here over the last few weeks because we got a bevy of very important decisions that were passed down. Again, they're about to be done with, or they are done with their term officially now. So typically in June, we get all these incredibly important decisions. But I want to do a little rundown of 4 of the most important decisions that we got from this legislative term from the Supreme Court. The first is the Tennessee trans law. So this is United States versus Skrmetti. So in terms of the background, back in 2023, Tennessee had SB 1, and this banned puberty blockers and hormone therapy for minors when used to, quote unquote, affirm a gender identity different from their birth sex. So this would basically allow for treatments for other medical needs, but not for something like this specifically. And then the ruling came down on June the 18th in a 6-3 decision with Chief Justice Roberts writing the law. And he says that it does not constitute sex-based discrimination, and thus it is subject only to a rational basis review, which essentially the court found that Tennessee met. So the majority emphasized that the medical and age-based distinctions, not gender identity, were central. So the dissensions were Sotomayor. The main dissension was Sotomayor, and she was joined by Kagan and Jackson. And they argued that the law masks sex discrimination and it harms vulnerable classes, if you can believe it. And the skinny on this one is it gives the states sovereignty when it comes to medical decisions, and it upholds that quote unquote gender transition, medical interventions for children does not hold up once it's under scrutiny. Okay, so that's one. The second is LGBTQ children's books opt-out provisions. This is Carson versus Macon. So the case was Christian and other religious parents in Maryland sued to allow an opt-out from classroom readings containing LGBTQ themes that conflict with their sincerely held religious beliefs. So essentially, Maryland was like, oh, it's going to be too complicated to allow certain people to opt out and other people not to opt out. So parents, you just basically don't have any rights. Okay. So the Supreme Court ruling handed down on June the 27th in a 6-3 ruling authored by Justice Alito. The court held that parents do have a constitutional right under the Free Exercise Clause to opt their children out of such instruction. The dissent came from the liberal trio. This was led by Sotomayor. It argued this effectively gives parents a veto over curriculum content threatening inclusive education, which of course it does. And the skinny on this one is that parents get to decide whether or not to expose their children to LGBTQ propaganda in schools. So a third decision that was handed down, this is the Texas pornography age verification law. So this is Free Speech Coalition, Inc. versus Paxton. So the background is there's a Texas law requiring age verification via government ID or transactional data to access online pornographic content. Okay, so this was a shield for minors from that. So the ruling came down on June the 27th. 27th in a 6-3 decision. Justice Thomas upheld the law, finding that it reasonably tailored to protect children and to not overly burden adults that wanted to masturbate looking at pornography. So the dissent was all three of the liberal justices. They said that it was concerning for free speech and for privacy and for cost burdens on adults or some such nonsense. But the skinny on this one is that it supports a mechanism for families that wish to guard their children from pornography. So it seems rather reasonable. Excuse me. And then the last one, and this one's perhaps the most important one and has the widest ramifications, the nationwide injunctions in birthright citizenship. So this is Trump v. CASA Inc. And so the issue is whether lower courts can issue nationwide injunctions, such as the block on Trump's executive order that aims to end birthright citizenship for children born as non-citizens. Okay. So basically the ruling handed down on the 27th in a 6-3 majority led by Justice Barrett held that judges lack authority to impose kind of blanket nationwide injunctions, right? So instead, the remedies that are put forth need to be individualized. So the prior injunctions blocking birthright policy could be vacated and, requiring case-by-case decisions. The dissent was Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson. It warned that this weakens judicial checks on executive actions and it could jeopardize constitutional protections for immigrants. But essentially, what the skinny on this one is that activist leftist judges can't unilaterally stop the agendas of Republican presidents. Okay, so one, lower court judge can't see something that Trump's doing and be like, I don't like that, and then put a blanket ban across the country. Now, for conservatives that are very excited about this, I want you to remember, we're not going to be in the White House for forever. So there will be Democrats that will use this ruling as well. So it's a little bit of a catch-22 double-edged sword here. But as I said, each one of these cases was decided 6-3, with all the Republican-nominated justices siding with sanity and all the Democratic-nominated justices siding with insanity. But let's take a stroll into a parallel universe for a second. Let's say that Hillary Clinton had won the 2016 election. Okay? Now, I know about the butterfly effect and everything's different if one thing has changed and we can't actually live in a parallel universe, but, just follow me for a little bit. Let's just assume that Hillary Clinton had gotten 3 nominations and that they were all approved and put on the court. So essentially the court would look like this. You would have 2 reliable conservatives in Thomas and Alito. You would have 1 non-reliable conservative in Roberts. And then you would have reliably leftist liberal activists. At a minimum, you would have Sotomayor and Kagan. Then you would have Hillary's 1, 2, and 3 picks, and then likely another Democratic pick. Okay? Perhaps it would have been a Republican pick, but let's just say it would have been another Democratic pick. So we'd be looking at a reliably 6-3, and in some cases 7-2 because of Roberts, leftist, liberal, activist majority on the court. Think about where we would be sitting right now. So now again, who knows what cases would have been heard and how they would have gone down, how they would have been voted, and who was the president after Hillary, and I get it. But here's something that I can guarantee you. Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood v. Casey would not have been overturned. I mean, duh, that would have probably never even been heard by the court had it been a 6-3 majority in the other way. But also, let's look at the 4 cases that I explained earlier. And here's what I can guarantee you about those. The ruling would have been 6-3 in the leftist, liberal, activist direction when it comes to basically all of these other laws. So which means they would have struck down the Tennessee law that would have protected gender-confused children from being butchered and destroyed by evil doctors and hospitals. They would have ensured that public school parents would have no say in protecting their children from vile, filthy, pornographic LGBTQ propaganda in schools. They would have made sure to allow pornography companies to continue having the easiest of easy access to our children. And they would have made sure that leftist, liberal, activist, lower court judges could unilaterally stop the agendas of Republican presidents. All that would have happened pretty much immediately. So, yes, thank God for the current makeup of the Supreme Court. And this matters and should matter to Christians for a few different reasons, and then we'll get into the quick hitters, and specifically for Christian men. The first reason this matters is that elections have consequences, okay? You've heard me say that. You've heard Albert Mohler say that. You've heard a lot of people say that. Because, guys, I'm just so tired of hearing from men that complain about the outcomes of elections and what's going on in this country. But, guys, if you don't vote, then you don't get to bitch. I don't want to hear it, okay? If you're not going to get out of your house and go down to your polling station and cast your ballot for a local election or a national election, then I don't want to hear you complaining about the consequences, the downstream consequences, whether they directly affect you or not. And the second thing is for Christians to not buy into the argument that we are supposed to somehow be above the political process. Because I've heard a lot of people do that. That's kind of the Benedict option and some different things like that. Hey, Christians just kind of pull away from this political process. Hey, for president, if there's not a candidate that is essentially Jesus, then we can't vote for that person because they're it's not the lesser of two evils. It's two evils, and we're not going to vote for evil and those types of things. A lot of Christians have bought into that nonsense. And guess what, guys? The arguments sound like they're coming from the religious right, but they're not. Leftist organizations are the ones that are trying to convince Christians, yeah, you're right, you should probably sit this one out. Because you can't look at the Bible and make any type of a biblically based argument that Christians should abdicate responsibility from the political process. Because we're supposed to push back darkness, like those that love God should hate evil, right? And one of the ways that we can push back against darkness and push back against evil is by putting righteous and morally upstanding people into positions to represent us, because we are a constitutional republic, and that's our setup. And so for Christians, especially you Christians, don't buy into this nonsense that somehow this doesn't have anything to do with you. And the last thing here, guys, is if we fall asleep at the wheel, right? If we take our foot off the gas, or, I was explaining this to somebody here recently. This is when I was talking to John Cooper. This is before he relaunched Cooper Stuff, right? Because he was kind of, waffling as to whether or not I should bring it back. He and I were having dinner, and he's like, yeah, I feel like with the way the country's going, like to a degree, it feels like we've won, and, the leftists seem to be running and they're down on the mat. And this is what I told John Cooper. I said, John, I know it seems that way, but if I'm fighting somebody, like a fight for my life, if I'm fighting someone like that, I don't stop until they stop moving, right? I don't stop when I knock them down. I don't stop when I trip them and they fall. Like, that's not when you stop. When they're on their ground and they're bleeding and hurt, they're still breathing. They can get up, right? So in a fight for my life, I don't stop until you stop moving, right? The same thing is true here. Yes, there have been some legislative wins because Trump is now in office. Yes, it is a better thing for this country that Democrats are not in control of both houses of Congress. Yeah, they're not in control of the House. They're not in control of the Senate. Yes, that is a net positive. But as John Cooper has said on his show, and as I've echoed, Republicans are going to get us to hell too. They're just going to get us there a whole lot slower than the Democrats are. Democrats are on the express A train, right? Trying to get us to hell as quickly as possible, moving in all these nefarious and negative positions. But guys, if we stop paying attention, because our guy's in office, right? Because we can wear our MAGA hat without shame, because we can say things online and not get, busted up too bad by social media, our social media betters or things like that, then sometimes it's going to lull us to sleep. Because right now the left is activated in this country. The Democratic Party is crazy right now. It's a cesspool. The people that they're elevating, it doesn't seem to be boding well for them in the future. But I think that this is one of those times where we have to make sure that we keep our foot on the gas and we keep pushing back against darkness. Hey guys, real quick. As you've heard me describe before, I am incredibly conservative about the supplements that I take. I spent years being terrified of putting different products in my body because I didn't know what they were made with, or if it was going to be kind of fly-by-night companies using all kinds of crazy ingredients. So I've always wanted to partner with an American company that only uses the highest quality ingredients, and that's why I want to remind you that we are partnered with Jocko Fuel. Jocko Fuel is Jocko Willing's supplement company that is based here in the United States. So what are some of my favorite products that they make? So they make whey protein powder, and guys, they just released a cookies and cream flavor not that long ago, and it is ridiculously good. Make sure you use it with milk. It makes it even better. They also make clean energy drinks. I finally decided what my favorite was, and that's pink lemonade. That is my favorite of all their flavors. But they also have the best tasting greens powder on the market. I prefer the peach flavor myself. They also make pre-workout and ready-to-drink protein. So I actually mix the ready-to-drink protein in my boys' milk, and they love it. They're constantly like, Dad, banana milk, banana milk. So we got to hook that up in the Thompson household. But I also use their krill oil, fish oil, creatine, vitamin D, and their sleep aids. And guys, they've got new stuff coming out all the time and a bunch of stuff I didn't even have time to mention. Guys, if you take your health and wellness seriously, then you simply can't afford to put cheap and inconsistent supplements inside of your body. Try Origin out today by going to www.jockofuel.com. That's jockofuel.com. Use the promo code Undaunted to get 10% off your order. Again, that's jockofuel.com, promo code Undaunted to get 10% off your order. All right, let's get into the quick hitters. Let's start with the 12-day war with the United States and Israel versus Iran. So I talked about this on last Thursday's episode with Mark Moyne Mullen, so we got into a few of the details. But since I last spoke about it on the show, the U.S. has actually gotten in on the action, doing a very coordinated and frankly, ridiculously impressive mission to essentially destroy Iran's nuclear capabilities. And so I have some quick thoughts on this as I've been thinking over the last couple of weeks. So let's get right into those. So this should be simple, right? This should be simple for everyone to understand. But Iran is a nation controlled by jihadists, okay? Jihadists don't care if they die. They would actually prefer, while they're killing you, to also die in the process, because then they get all those virgins in the afterlife, right? Ergo, jihadists that don't care if they die simply cannot have a nuclear weapon. Again, I don't know how this is hard, right? So as a lot of people pointed out on the internet, it's like Democrats are like, hey, it's okay if Iran goes nuclear. It's okay if they have a nuclear weapon. What's the big deal? But hey, you can't have a gun. Couldn't possibly do that, right? So make it make sense. Another thing, so Joby actually texted me after my last episode where I talked about this, and he was talking specifically about preemptive strikes and self-defense, and he said specifically like, hey, David didn't wait for Goliath to take this first shot. You know what I mean? So these people that are like, oh, this isn't defensive, this is offensive, and it's violative of all these different things. It's like, it just doesn't make sense. Because the thing about it is those that are advocating for peace and for negotiations and why can't we all be friends, these people can only do that because they live in a country protected by a bunch of toxically masculine dudes. So you're sitting in your air-conditioned apartment in New York City or in Austin, Texas, or some liberal enclave here in this country, and you're sitting there like, why is everyone so mad? Or even people on the right, people that are pretty divisive and they don't think we should be in regime change wars and all that, even though I still maintain that pretty much every war is a regime change war, because whether you are getting specific people out of office and putting new people in, you want the regime to change how they're acting, right? So even if we don't want to completely replace every person that's in power, we want them to change how they are running their regime. So every war is essentially a regime change war. But then this comes into the discussion of just war theory, because people think that preemptive attacks are unacceptable via just war theory. But if you've studied just war theory, preemptive attacks are acceptable, they are just, and they are moral, okay? Because this blends into a discussion of peace through strength, which I'm a huge fan of, by the way, as an approach to foreign policy and also just generally to, life in general, right? But you have to have the strength part to even have a chance for the peace part, right? Peace through strength. Okay, how do we get peace? Through strength. If you don't have displays of strength, if you don't carry that big stick, then how is peace going to come? It's going to come by accident if it comes at all. And then I, also have a message for all the pacifistic Christians out there that don't think that Americans should have done this and that we should never hurt a fly. And if you're a huge fan of Shane Claiborne, you think he's a smart guy and all that, I think you guys need to read Revelation again. Okay? Did Jesus come back to negotiate? Right? I'm pretty sure he doesn't. Okay, he comes back, his hair is white, his eyes are like fire, he's got a tattoo on his leg, he's got a sword in his mouth, he's on a horse, he's got a head with many crowns on it, his robe is covered in blood. Is that the blood from the cross? Is that the blood of his enemies? We don't exactly know, but he's not coming back here to negotiate. And I don't think Jesus is going to be waiting on a punch before he throws a counter. Okay, next quick hitter here. New York City likely electing a bona fide communist to be their next mayor. So this is according to USA Today on June the 25th. Zoran Mamdani, a 33-year-old Democratic Socialist State Assembly member, upset mainstream Democratic politics by defying expectations and taking a commanding lead in the June 24th New York City mayoral primary. Just after midnight, he addressed supporters saying that he and former Governor Andrew Cuomo, the moderate Democrat who was the frontrunner, need to bring the nation's largest city together. Tonight, we made history, Mamdani boasted to a celebrating crowd in Queens. With 96% of the vote counted, Mamdani led Cuomo 44-36 in first place votes. So Mamdani is going to be the Democratic representative, which essentially guarantees that he is going to win the race for mayor in New York City. There's some people that are trying to put a whole bunch of money behind different candidates. They're trying to make sure that there's not two independent candidates that are, with current Mayor Adams and then former Governor Cuomo, making sure that they don't split votes. But essentially, Mamdani is essentially guaranteed to win. So a few weeks ago, right, no one knew who Zoran Mamdani was. I'd heard the name, but I wasn't paying any attention to him. But now he's the talk of the town because everyone's got to hear about who he is and what he's about. So who is he? Again, he's 33 years old. He's a Muslim. He was born in Uganda. He's only been a United States citizen for 7 years, and he's part of the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, and he is basically a communist. And I say basically, he is a communist, right? Everything that he believes is communistic. So just a few generic questions here for people to consider before we move on. In general, do you think it's a good idea for someone that has only been a U.S. citizen for about 7 years to run our country's largest and most populated city? Also, in general, do you think it's a good idea for someone in their early 30s to run our country's largest and most populated city? And in general, do you think it's a good idea for an open communist to run our country's largest and most populated city? Just a few generic things to think about. But now we need to talk specifically about Mamdani and what he actually believes and what he thinks his legislative agenda should be. So for New York City and probably as a wider thing, he thinks that they should abolish the New York Police Department, the NYPD. They should abolish prisons. They should abolish medical bills. I don't know how you would do that. They should abolish private health care, ban all guns, legalize sex work, create safe injection sites for people to shoot up drugs, end cash bail, decriminalize drug possession, end sentencing enhancements, and end all cooperation with ICE. Now, there's a whole lot more. That's just kind of the highlights, but also he's very pro-jihadist. Like he's very pro of a lot of jihadist groups. I mean, he's been given multiple opportunities to decry some previous statements that he made saying that there should be a global intifada. Okay, to globalize the intifada, but he refuses to take back those previous statements. Intifada is basically an uprising, a Muslim Islamist uprising. He doesn't want to decry that because he's actually pro that. So in terms of how he won, because again, everyone was pretty shocked by the fact that he won, according to the exit polling, he overwhelmingly won with educated, rich white people. And he lost by wide margins with poor whites, black and brown people, and blue-collar workers. So essentially the people that would be the least impacted by all of his terrible legislative ideas and his agenda, those are the ones that voted for him, the ones that aren't going to be impacted by this. So my big takeaways on this one is, play stupid games, win stupid prizes, but this particular stupid game could negatively impact the entire country. Because for me personally, I don't generally care about politics in jurisdictions that I don't live, right, in terms of how it affects the local populace. So if you live in, random town, wherever, Wyoming, I don't really care about your mayor race or any of those types of things. But this is a description of the new normal because this is the mayor of our largest city, okay? Economically speaking, one of the most important, if not the most important cities in the entire country. And what Mamdani being elected in terms of, winning the Democratic primary and then eventually to be elected as the mayor of New York City, this is the new normal of the Democratic Party because AOC is a huge fan of this guy. There are people that are already talking about him trying to run for something more in a national context, whether, he is able to do so legally or not. But it goes to another one of my big takeaways, which is the future of the left, right? The capital L left in America is terrifying. Because if you just read down everything that this person believes, you would think that this person shouldn't win a mayoral race for a city that has 500 people that live in it, much less a city with millions and millions and millions of people. But this is what is considered okay and positive for left-leaning people in America, especially people that have had their brains rotted by going to our American university, through our American university system. Like, if you want a description or an argument for the fact that our American university system is just something to make you a leftist gay person or somebody that has these crazy, insane beliefs in systems that have never worked once in the history of human civilization, look at this. Look at Mamdani becoming the, very likely to be next mayor of New York City. And the last quick hitter on here, it's going to be a little bit controversial, but we'll lean into it. It took them about a quarter of a century, but the jihadists will soon claim New York City. So September 11, 2001, jihadists flew planes into the World Trade Centers, knocking those down, killing thousands of people. And Osama bin Laden and the people of his ilk, the number one thing they wanted to do is they wanted to take down this country, and they wanted to start with our most populated and most famous city. And here we are years later. And so some people are like, oh, you're just overreacting to the fact that he's a Muslim. Well, I've said on record, and I completely believe it, Islam is not compatible with the West. And so you might be thinking of a person in your life that you know that is Muslim, and well, he doesn't act like the people of Boko Haram or the people of Al-Qaeda or the people of ISIS or any of these types of groups. Right. And also that means that they're not comporting themselves in a way that is appropriately Muslim. We'll get to another story here in just a second where we'll talk more about that. But this is a pro-jihadist Muslim that's about to be the mayor of the city that was almost brought to its knees by jihadist Muslims. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. But this gets right into the next quick hitter here. Muslim fundamentalists killing over 200 Christians in Nigeria. And if you think I'm repeating a story that I've talked about before on the show, I'm not. This is a fresh new one. So this is according to Protesti on June the 13th. In the early hours of Friday, June the 13th, 2025, more than 200 Christian villagers were slaughtered by heavily armed Fulani jihadists in Yelwada, a farming community in Guma County, Benue State. This mass killing is part of a disturbing wave of targeted violence that has swept across central Nigeria in recent weeks. The attack began around 10 p.m. Thursday night. According to the witnesses, over 40 gunmen stormed the village on motorcycles in pairs, shouting Allahu Akbar as they opened fire on civilians, moving from house to house, setting homes on fire, and killing indiscriminately. So my big takeaway on this one is this is exactly what the Prophet Muhammad would want Muslims to do. But nobody wants to reckon with it. There are times when I feel like I'm just screaming into the void because every few weeks, maybe every month or so, I'm talking about a story like this, where people who are screaming Allahu Akbar, which means God is good, right? Their version of God, as they're killing men, women, and children, right? But if you read the 9th surah of the Quran, I've talked about this ad nauseum. You can go back to all my episodes where I've discussed this. That is the least abrogated of all the surahs in the Quran because it's not in any type of order, and it's the most violent and most bloody. Their false prophet Muhammad, who was being spoken to by a demon, right, as he was basically creating what would later become the Quran and his teachings and all those different things and the hadith and everything else, it says you should kill the infidel. So you go to Christian villages that are nearby and you slaughter people that don't say that Muhammad is the one prophet, right? That are not fans of the Shahada, that don't want a global intifada, right? I don't understand why more Christians won't step up and talk about this. To the pastors listening to this, why won't you talk about this? Because when you listen to these imams, they're more than happy to talk about you in your church and the head of your church, which is not the Pope, but Jesus, right? But you don't want to be needlessly divisive. You don't want to be offensive. You don't want to talk about Islam. Because again, I feel like pastors don't understand. Look, you can talk about Islam without talking about individual Muslims, right? Demonize the ideology that is causing people to do things, not those individual people, because those individual people were made in the image of God and they need Christ just like everyone else. But we won't talk about it. We don't want to talk about it from the pulpit. We don't want to talk about it while we're speaking somewhere. We don't want to talk about it on social media. We just don't want to touch it. We definitely aren't going to do a 4-week series on it. Like, here's our next 4-week series. Why Islam is demonic. Why Islam is not compatible with the West. Why you can't be pro-Islam and be a Christian. There, I just gave you the first 3 weeks, right? But nobody wants to touch it. So I guess we're just going to keep reporting on these stories and then just hope Jesus comes back quickly before they all get slaughtered. Okay, that's your plan. Next quick hitter here. A child therapist pleading guilty to distributing videos of infants being raped. So this is according to Libs of TikTok on June the 24th. Long Island child therapist Renee Hoberman pleads guilty to distribution of videos of infants being raped. Hoberman admitted to using social media to upload, receive, and trade digital videos depicting minors, including several videos of infants being physically restrained and raped by an adult male as the infants cried and screamed. So Hoberman faces up to 20 years in prison. I mean, just think about that, guys. Again, we're here to equip men to push back darkness. We can't push back darkness if we're not going to talk about it. Actually, you know what? Additional side note. So I'll get to my big takeaway here in a second. I've gotten criticism from people, in my inbox and my DMs and different things like that. People that, listen to the show or they watch me on social media and they just, that's kind of a rough story that you shared. Is that really the best way to fight back darkness by describing it in detail? And, we should just, talk about more uplifting stories and stories that are happier and all those types of things. So if you have a problem with the stories that I share and talk about on this show and on my social media, save your messages of concern, okay? I will discuss what I choose to discuss on this show, and if you don't like it, you can kick rocks, okay? You can't equip men to push back darkness if you don't help them recognize it. Several of the things that we've talked about on the show, men and Christians here in this country don't consider it to be dark, right? That's why I talked about on the Daily Blade recently. There's things that we just don't hate enough. We don't hate abortion enough. We don't hate child exploitation and child abuse enough. We don't hate the isms, communism, socialism, Marxism, feminism. We don't hate those things enough, right? So that's what I'm trying to equip men to do. I'm trying to steel the nerves of you guys, STEEL, steel your nerves, give you a little bit of steel in your spines to where, yes, you should be able to call these things out and call what is evil, evil, and you should rail against it. So if this makes you uncomfortable and squishy, stop subscribing to the show, stop listening, and don't let me affect your delicate sensibilities anymore, freaking pansies. So here's my big takeaway on this story. Again, please tell me why we shouldn't do public executions. Tell me why her, again, she is presumed innocent even though she has pled guilty, so she's basically said that she is guilty of this. Why should this woman be allowed to live? She's going to face 20 years in prison for distributing pornography with infants being raped for the masturbatory aid pleasure of demonic, evil men in this country. 20 years in prison. Maybe, right? I mean, she actually does 20 years in prison. I'll be shocked considering the jurisdiction she's coming from. But where we're at right now, why does she get to live? Why? So she's just going to pay her debt to the society by spending a little bit of time in prison for distributing this? And also what we haven't heard about, what about the man, right? The demon that was doing this to the children. Have we caught this person yet? Right? So let's say we do catch this person who was for his own sexual gratification and to make money was raping infants, right? So think about like an 18-month-old, okay, being anally penetrated by this demon. What is the argument for keeping this person alive? After they go through and they get their due process and they get their one appeal, why don't we execute them publicly? Don't you think that would cause people to hesitate when it comes to filming, distributing, and profiting off of this? If we killed people in the town square, if we chopped their heads off with guillotines, or we hung them until they died, or if we had them somehow raped to death, right? Again, what is the argument against it? Oh, we're more evolved now. We're more civilized now. Well, apparently we're not, because stuff like this is still happening. All right, next quick hitter here. The American Medical Association doubling down on their commitment to transing the kids. So this is according to the Daily Wire. The American Medical Association, the AMA, the largest medical association in the United States, is coming out against the Supreme Court's ruling in the United States versus Scrimeti, which we talked about earlier, arguing that irreversible and damaging transgender procedures for minors are necessary treatments. The American Medical Association is disappointed in today's decision that opens the door to further intrusion into patient care and harmful government interference into the practice of medicine. AMA President Dr. Bobby Mukamala said in a statement after the ruling came down. So my big takeaway on this one, I think I'm officially done listening to the expert class, right? Because you say AMA, you say the American Medical Association, and you automatically associate that with a group of people that is for the overall medical betterment and benefit of Americans. It's right there in the name, Kyle. American Medical Association. These are people that want us to be healthy, to be well, and the reality is they apparently don't. They apparently don't. Because there is no medically based or scientifically based argument for why we should give puberty blockers to a child, for why we should cut off the healthy breast tissue of a child that is gender confused, for why we should shave off a piece of a little girl's arm and then tie it into this phallic-like looking thing and sew it to the top of her vagina, which we actually just got through sewing up as well because this person's gender confused. There is no scientific or medical basis for the argument why we should chop off the genitalia of a baby boy or a child that is a boy because he thinks he's a girl. And they've made no arguments to the contrary. They just don't like it. Which makes you wonder, why does the AMA not agree with this ruling if they actually cared about the medical benefit and overall health of Americans? Is it that they're on the take too? Is it that they know, because of the nature of these surgeries and these treatments, that you're going to have these gender confused kids on the docket and you're going to have them on the dole, and they're going to basically be paying for treatments over and over and over through these hospital systems that fund the AMA? Could that have anything to do with it? Because it's not like, oh, we just give a kid a pill. This little boy thinks he's a girl. Here's a pill. Gender has been transitioned. Nope. Starts out with blockers, goes to more intense blockers, then it moves to some other therapy that the hospital can help you with and charge you for. Then it comes into the transition surgeries, and then these surgeries have incredibly high issues with them. And so you're going to continue to have treatments and surgeries essentially for the rest of your life. And who gets to profit off of that? The hospital system, right? Who eventually profits off of that? The AMA. So I'm not one of those people that 2020 just completely destroyed my brain, and I don't listen to anybody for any reason. I just completely distrust everything, and everything's a conspiracy, and Tucker Carlson's right about everything, and some random dork that goes on the Joe Rogan Experience actually did see aliens and spaceships. Like, I'm not turning into that person, but I'm definitely going to look askant at any supposed expert group when they defend something, because the AMA is showing you what they're about. Without saying it, they are about profit motive, because this is a huge profit center for these hospital systems that are evil enough to take money to destroy these kids. All right, next quick hitter here. The UK essentially decriminalizing late-term abortion. This is according to the BBC on June the 17th. MPs have voted to change abortion legislation to stop women in England and Wales being prosecuted for ending their pregnancy. Ending their pregnancy, nice euphemism. The landslide vote to decriminalize the procedure is the biggest change to abortion laws in England and Wales for nearly 60 years. Women who terminate their pregnancy outside of the rules, for example, after the 24-week mark, will no longer be at risk of being investigated by police. So what this story says, guys, is essentially women in the UK who murder their babies via late-term abortion, they won't be prosecuted. So late-term abortion is effectively decriminalized in the UK. And so I was curious of how to approach this particular story, because basically every story that I talk about when it comes to the UK is just like a description of like how in the world is the United States like a downstream consequence of the UK, and look where the UK is now, and is that where we're headed? But anyway, my big takeaway on this one is that the UK has fallen, but it somehow keeps falling. So I've talked about the fact that they allowed so much migration into their country, unchecked migration, specifically from third world countries, even more specifically from third world Islamic countries. They're not enforcing laws. They're arresting people, not enforcing laws that benefit the populace, I should say. They're arresting people and jailing people for judgmental tweets, mean comments on social media. They're arresting women silently praying outside of abortion facilities, not blocking the entrance and not talking specifically to anyway, but sitting there with their eyes closed, praying to the God of the universe that they would stop slaughtering and murdering babies in that country. Those people are being arrested and sometimes put in prison. And then now you have something like this, to where if you're 40 weeks pregnant in the UK and you kill the baby inside of you on purpose, right? They're not going to even try to charge you with anything. They're not even going to try to prosecute you in any way. I know we have listeners in the UK. How are you guys dealing with this? How are you pushing back against this type of darkness? Because I know the UK is kind of a post-Christian nation, even though we're seeing a lot of the young folks, specifically the young boys, going back to church and going back to their Bibles. So maybe in 10, 15, 20 years, we'll be singing off of a different sheet of music. But how much more will the UK fall by then? Will there be anything left? Because if you allow your city and if you allow your country to be burned, there's only so much you can do with the ashes. So I guess we'll have to keep an eye on that. All right, next quick hitter here, a U.S. Congresswoman using her baby boy as a prop. So I want to show you a video here. So this was a recent, they were questioning Fed Chairman Jerome Powell recently. And this is United States House of Representatives member Brittany Peterson. She's a Democrat from Colorado. And I want you to watch this here.
Thank you for your long service to our country. I know that you've served under many Democrats, Republicans. You've always been nonpartisan and done your job to put our country first, and we appreciate your steadfast leadership. And if you are not reappointed, it will be very missed here. I have some concerns when I think about, I know you've touched on this a little bit through the questions today, but around the independence of the...
All right, so if you're just listening to this, it really doesn't matter what the woman says because there's a baby on her lap. Like, I don't know, 3-4-month-old baby sitting there on her lap while she's doing this whole charade. The thing about it is because she had the baby on her lap, everything that she was saying and all the questions she was asking were essentially not important because Brittany Peterson is clearly not a serious person. I mean, many people in the United States House aren't serious people, but this is pretty egregious, okay? She's using her baby as a prop in order to make a point, but the only point that she's making is actually my big takeaway. She needs to go home. And this isn't some sort of misogynistic rant that I'm about to go on about women just need to be, basically making sourdough and being barefoot and pregnant. If they're ever seen outside the home, they should be stoned to death or something like that. I mean, this isn't an Islamic country after all. But like at the same time, what is she doing there? Are you telling me that her constituents that voted for her in Colorado want her to be caring for her child while she's legislating on their behalf in Congress? Is that what these people want? Because look, your jurisdiction that you're voting in is going to have a bunch of different House of Representatives members represent you over a long period of time. But that baby boy gets one mom. Like I tell people all the time, people are like, "Oh, are you going to, be coaching your boys in jiu-jitsu and in baseball and all those types of things?" Like I don't see that. You know why? Those boys, James and Eli, get one dad. They're going to have a bunch of coaches. They're going to have a bunch of teachers. They're going to have some tutors. They're going to have all kinds of different people. They get one dad. Okay? Not saying I wouldn't help them with some jiu-jitsu stuff. Not saying I wouldn't help them with some wrestling. Wouldn't help them with some baseball. Wouldn't help them with homework. But they're going to get that from a lot of other places. I get to be dad. That baby boy on her lap gets one mom. And if women want to work outside the home, I'm completely okay with that. Like, I don't think you can make a biblical argument that says women shouldn't have jobs. I think people that do that are like hyper, super duper fundamentalists, I don't think that they're exegeting the parts of scripture that they use properly to make those assertions. Okay. Like I just don't see that in any way, shape, or form. But what is the benefit of this woman working this job in Congress and trying to raise that baby? Like what's the point? Because again, there aren't that many people in Congress when it comes to a comparison to the rest of the population size of the United States. We're talking about a few hundred people, right? Total in Congress, both houses, okay? Just not that many people, 3 digits worth of people. So if you want to raise your child, if you want to have kids, just do it at home. Or here's a shocking thing. You make a good living as a congressperson. I don't know what her husband does, but I'm sure y'all make enough to hire a babysitter. Also, I found this out recently. Did you know that Congress, they have like daycares for Congress people that have kids? So you, the American taxpayer, are paying for someone else's childcare. But this woman, this unserious woman, decides, no, you know what? I'm not going to do any of the free daycare. I'm also not going to pay for daycare for someone to watch my kid while I go to this House of Representatives questioning meeting where I'm talking to, the Fed chairperson, right? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to set this baby right down in my lap. Now, let's say she's in the middle of her allotted time and the baby craps himself, blowout. What's she going to do? Does the business of Congress have to stop so she can change a crappy diaper? Because you might be like, well, the baby just crapped and needs his diaper change. Yeah. In the halls of Congress? Right? No, sorry, not the halls of Congress. This is the chamber, right? This is where the business goes down. What if the baby just started crying and screaming? Do we take a pause? Does she have to cede her time back? Let's say you're a constituent of hers in Colorado, right? So you voted for this unserious person and you're watching C-SPAN because you're one of those people. And in the first 10 seconds, she just a few minutes to question Jerome Powell. The baby starts losing it, right? Level 10 freak out. And, she can't do any procedural thing to kind of hit the pause button or hand the baby off or something like that because she's got to make her point. She's got to sell her t-shirts. And then she goes, okay, I give my time back, right? And you're sitting there, you're like, no, I'm watching C-SPAN. I really care what Jerome Powell has to say. And I want my gal, right, that I voted for. I want her to go to the United States Congress. I want her to advocate in a way that I would like. Like, how excited are you about that situation? Okay. Like, people think when people talk like this, oh, you're anti-family, you're anti-baby. No, I'm actually the exact opposite. I'm pro family. I'm pro baby. I'm pro women being mothers, right? Doesn't mean you can't do other things, but it does mean that that is your primary role and responsibility, right? So if you're taking time away from your family and your family is, there's a deficit in your household because you're serving in Congress or because you're running a business or because you're doing some other thing with your time, leaning into your hobby, getting your nails and hair done as opposed to taking care of your kids and helping them with their homework, that's a problem. That's a problem. Again, I'm pro women doing all those other things, but that baby needs his mama. And mama needs to be outside of that chamber taking care of the baby. All right, now we need to talk about me landing in Instagram jail. So here I am about a week ago, and I'm trying to send a video that I thought was funny. I was sending it to my wife or a buddy or something like that. And Instagram says, you can't send this message. Click here to find out why. I'm like, what in the world is going on? So I click. I thought there was something wrong with the story or with the post. So I click it and it says that parts of my Instagram account have been shut down for 72 hours because I violated their terms and service and their community guidelines. And I'm like, oh boy, here we go. So I click on the why part. And so I believe it was a year ago. If not, it was 2 years ago, but I'm pretty sure it was last year. There was a video that was circulating all over the internet, including all over Instagram. It was of a young boy. I think he was 10 or 11 years old. He was at a pride, parade event, and right, there's a stage and there's like a DJ and music and all these pro pride LGBTQ evil people in the crowd. And this young boy starts twerking. And the MC or whatever's on the mic going, ass everywhere, ass everywhere, ass everywhere. It was like this big thing. The crowd's going wild, right? A bunch of gay men in the crowd that are like super aroused by this 10, 11-year-old boy twerking. Showing him his butt, right? So they're super into it, right? And so what I did is I posted the video and drew attention to it and just castigated everyone in the comments. Like the people that ran the event, the parents that let that boy go up on stage, all the people celebrating in the crowd, this evil debauchery, this abomination, right? And so I posted that because again, people were like, why would you even share this? You're making it bigger. No. I'm showing you what darkness looks like. Because a lot of you just walk around with your eyes blocked and your ears plugged and you're not looking at the darkness around you and you're shocked when something like this actually happens. So I'm trying to bring it to your attention. So I go in to the little Instagram comments where it says I violated the terms of service and I violated the community guidelines, and it said that they dinged my account for child sexual exploitation. Me. I was dinged for it. But that video, right? So it forcibly took that post down. You can still find that video all over Instagram. And you know the accounts that video is still allowed to be on? The pro-LGBTQ accounts. The people that shared that video because they loved it. They thought, how great is this? That we even got kids getting in on the action, right? Because again, the Pride Parade thing, it's already weird and debauched and crazy. But gosh, the people running the events, they just love it when kids show up. Isn't that so interesting? The face painting, not a whole lot of adults that are into face painting. Kids are. They're getting, trans flag and the LGBTQ flag and all that painted on their face and all that. They just love it. It's because they're trying to inculcate these children into the thought process that this is not a debauched, sinful, evil, nasty type of a lifestyle. This is just normal. Dudes in dog collars and BDSM gear, there was one, I think it was in California, where this guy was in a kiddie pool and guys were just coming by and pissing on him, right? This is at an event where children were walking by, okay? So you can go to those people's pages and you can still watch that video. But when I post it and decry it, it's child sexual exploitation, okay? So which some people would be like, why are you on Instagram then? Right? Why not just delete your account? Here's the thing, guys. Eventually there's going to be a day where Meta, right? Facebook and Instagram, they're going to turn my account off. I'm already preparing for that. But for now, there's I got 70,000 some followers on Instagram and, a little bit less than that on Facebook. I'm going to post things that equip you to push back darkness for as long as they will allow it, right? Because they are private companies and they can choose whether or not I get to have an account. And there will be a day when I no longer have an account. I know that day is coming, but my reason for being on this planet is equipping men to push back darkness. I'm going to continue doing it using all of the different things at my disposal. All right, last quick hitter here. We need to talk about a lesson that we can all learn from the Oklahoma City Thunder winning an NBA championship. So I remember being a kid and I loved watching the NBA playoffs because as a kid, I basically watched SportsCenter. That's what I watched before I went to bed. That's what I watched in the morning, and I love the highlights and all that, but I really got into the NBA playoffs, with the Jordan era and different things like that, so I loved it. And then I forget what year it was, but the Oklahoma City Thunder, we stole the Seattle Supersonics because New Orleans, what would they have been? They were the Hornets then at the time, I believe. They weren't the Pelicans yet. But Hurricane Katrina came through, so they couldn't play all their games there in New Orleans, and so they came to Oklahoma City, and they were Oklahoma City Hornets there for a while. And then we proved that this city the state could sustain a professional sports team. We eventually steal the Seattle Supersonics, so we have the Oklahoma City Thunder. Terrible for a long time, but they had this young man named Kevin Durant. And then they drafted a young man named Russell Westbrook. Then they drafted a young man named Serge Ibaka, and James Harden came thereafter as well. Thunder go to the NBA Finals in 2012. They lose in 5 games to LeBron James's Miami Heat team for his first championship there in Miami. And you're thinking to yourself, all right, no big deal. Youngest team in the NBA, the core of Durant, Westbrook, and Harden. This team's going to go nuts. We're going to get right back to this position, right? Again, with the we language, right? Even though I don't play for the team. Thunder don't go back to the NBA Finals, right? There were some injuries. James Harden demanded a trade. Kevin Durant eventually signed with the Golden State Warriors. Russell Westbrook even was eventually traded. And then you go into rebuild mode, okay? And then you get to 2020. 2020, we have George Floyd dying while in police custody because he overdosed and his heart exploded. The NBA during COVID and all that, they did basically the Mickey Mouse Championship where they had all the NBA teams go to Disney World. They basically played an AAU tournament without crowds, and the players didn't have to travel and all those types of things. And they had Black Lives Matter right there on the court. And in that moment, just with all the optics and with having literally the name of a Marxist communist organization, Black Lives Matter, right there on the court, basically saying, hey, all you white people that's helped support this league, you're all a bunch of racists. There's nothing you can do about it. I was like, you know what? Screw you, NBA. There's other things I can watch. Like, I'm busy. I got things going on. It's hard for me to watch Major League Baseball games and UFC fights, and those are my 2 favorite things. So I was like, okay, I'm just done with the NBA. But you're the type of guy, and I'm the type of guy, I will scroll the internet, and the internet knows I'm into sports. And so I at least kind of knew what was going on in the NBA. I would kind of see who won the championship, and you'd see, big dunks and big blocks and that type of thing. But then over the last couple of years, the Thunder have kind of been good, right? So they traded Paul George back in the day. They get SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and they get all these picks and all these types of things. Last year, lo and behold, the Thunder were the number 1 seed going into the playoffs. They lost in the second round, but it's like, hey, there's something going on with this team. But then it got to this year. For most of the year, the Oklahoma City Thunder were considered to be the best team in the NBA, right? So again, I'm not following the NBA. I'm not checking scores. But every time you looked up and someone's talking about the Thunder, they're talking about, can this team actually win a championship? This is the youngest team in the entire NBA. Is this team going to win a championship? So you get into the playoffs and they sweep the first series. And it's like, yeah, but all these other teams are still good. Then they're playing against the Denver Nuggets, which has the best basketball player on the planet, Nikola Jokic. And the Thunder go 7 games, beat them. Then it's like, well, they're probably going to lose in the next round because Minnesota, they've got some really good players. Beat Minnesota in 5 games, win the Western Conference, go into the NBA Finals. So living here in a suburb of Oklahoma City, the excitement of the Oklahoma City Thunder going back to the NBA Finals was literally palpable. It was so thick you could grab a handful of it out of the air, right? But along with the excitement came an unbelievable amount of anxiety. Because for a Thunder fan and for this city and the state, been here before, right? 2012, hot young team. They come in, they don't quite get it done, but you think you're going to go on a run. So there's all this negativity along with the excitement and along with the anxiety, and it's just kind of all swirling around. Thunder lose game 1 on a last-second shot. Oh, no, it's happening, right? They lost the game at home. Oh, it's happening again. But then they win game 2. But then they lose game 3. Oh, no, everything's terrible. But then they win game 2. And then they win game 5. Oh, we're 1 win away. And then in game 6, Thunder got beat by 87 points. One of the biggest blowouts in NBA Finals history. Now it's game 7, right? There were 2 days before game 7 here in Oklahoma City. And my goodness, everyone was nervous. Right? That morning at church, because the game was on a Sunday, people are just nervous. People didn't really want to talk about it, right? And so I'll say for me, again, not being an NBA fan and being one of those guys that says, hey, don't let sports ruin your night. I'm one of those guys. I could feel, because of the excitement around me, that I was starting to care about the outcome. I was starting to really care whether or not the Oklahoma City Thunder, a team that I've never played on, an organization that I've never worked for, I really, really cared whether or not they won Game 7. So much so that I thought it was going to start affecting how I was acting. The old Kyle that used to lose his mind when the St. Louis Cardinals would lose a game in May, right? I could feel that guy coming back a little bit. So you know what I did on Sunday night during the game? I sat in the hospital room with a buddy of mine that's in the hospital. You know what was on the television? Sunday Night Baseball, right? It was Phillies Mets, okay? Sitting there chatting with him, chatting with his family. Not a care in the world, right? I actually showed up to Fight Club and only one other dude showed up. So I was ready to train that night. And when nobody showed up, right, you know, where it's not just two of us going to sit there and train, just went to the hospital, hung out with my buddy. Because I didn't want that stress and that anxiety of, you know, a team going on a 5-0 run, but then the other team goes on an 11-2 run and all the ups and all the downs and oh my gosh, the injuries and the excitement and all. I just didn't want it. But I come home and my wife's sitting there watching the game. There's about 3.5 minutes left in the game. And at that point, it's pretty clear the Thunder are likely going to win. We go and wake up our boys, right? And because we want them to see the excitement of, hey, our state team, right? The one pro team that we have here in this state, the top level pro team. We got some, you know, AAA and AA baseball, but the top pro team in the state, they're about to win. So we want them to have that core memory. Our boys were barely able to wake up. And so I don't even know if they remembered any of that, but then here they go. They close it out. The Oklahoma City Thunder are NBA champions, the youngest team in the league, the youngest team in like, I don't know, half a century to win the NBA finals, right? And you feel happy for your state, right? You feel happy for the fans. You feel happy for the financial ramifications for this city and this state. You feel happy for what this is going to be like, having a championship banner in the rafters when they build a new stadium and a new arena, and for the amount of money and the financial impact it's going to have on the city and like all the positives, right? But this is my big takeaway. So I'm not setting all this up just to poo-poo on it, but it's just an area of concern that guys need to reckon with. The line between fandom and idolatry is incredibly blurry. I think we need to stop pretending like it isn't. Because most guys have that team that they live and die with, right? So around here, I'm exposed to people that just live and die with the outcome of every OU Sooners football game, right? Every Oklahoma State football game. The people that live and die with the outcome of a Thunder game. Right? People live and die with the outcome of whoever their favorite NHL team is or MLS team, if people technically watch soccer in this country. Whatever the thing is, their favorite fighter, their favorite boxer, right? They live and die with the outcome. Tell me that's not idolatry. I mean, it's okay to be a fan of a sport, right? I'm still a St. Louis Cardinals fan, even though I don't really support the NBA, right? Until they can prove that they're not going to throw Black Lives Matter in my face again. But you could certainly say I'm an Oklahoma City Thunder fan. I would prefer for them to win over all the other teams. So I guess that makes me a fan. But at what point, and this is going to be different for every person, at what point is your fandom idolatry? Because this came up earlier. I had a guy DM me about, you know, drinking alcohol, and, you know, he's kind of confused about what the Bible says about alcohol. And he says, hey, should we all just not drink just in case? And, you know, hey, you know, even talks about, you know, don't do this behavior because it might cause your brother to stumble. It's like, okay, well, are you going to be eating nachos and drinking beer in front of your fat buddy? Right? Because it applies there too, right? So where are we going to begin and end this type of argumentation? But specifically when it comes to fandom, or I'll stick with drinking. So like me, I can have 2 or 3 glasses of whiskey and it not be sinful because 1, I won't become drunk, and 2, I don't worship at the altar of the next time I get to do that behavior. But there are people in my life too that come off the top of my head that if they were to have 1 sip of 1 drink, it would be sin. Because there was a time in their life where they were idolizing alcohol, the effect that it would have on them, and they were addicted to it, right? So it's sinful for certain people to do that. Now, it's sinful for everybody that gets drunk. But in those moments, I think you can make an argument that if a previous alcoholic or somebody that's done horrible things while under the influence of alcohol, having any type of a drink, that it would be sinful for them to do so. So is watching a game, going to a game, painting up your face and cheering for your favorite team, is that idolatry and sinful? No, I don't think so. But it does become idolatry and sinful at a certain point. And I don't have another point to make. I just want y'all to consider that. Because I had to come to a place with the St. Louis Cardinals specifically, because again, remember, I lived and died with every single pitch of every single game. That's 162 games plus All-Star game plus playoffs, right? Thousands and thousands and thousands of pitches, hundreds and hundreds of hours of attention every single season, right? I had created an idol out of the success or failure of a franchise in baseball that I never played for nor worked for. Which is another reason why I don't really say we. That's something that now it's such a thing in my head now where I try to remind other people. When I'm watching the St. Louis Cardinals, it's not we won or we lost. It's they. I'm not a member of the St. Louis Cardinals. I have never worked there. I have just opted into being a fan. When your favorite college football team wins or loses a game, it's not we. When your favorite, college basketball team wins or loses a tournament game, it's not we did that. It's they did that. Now, you individually can enjoy that. You can be a part of that. You can cheer that on. You can root for your chosen outcome, but it's not we, it's they. You didn't do anything, right? Even if you're in the stadium making the noise, which, made it harder for the coach to get the play in because they couldn't hear. Okay, maybe you could say there's a little bit of we in that, but you're not on the field, right? You're not dealing with the X's and O's. You're not dealing with, the pitch clock. You're not dealing with the launch angle. You're not dealing with defensive formations. You're just not really a part of it. But for every single one of the guys in this audience that is an incredibly big fan of a sports team, I want you to spend some time in prayer, spend some time in the Bible, spend some time talking to other guys. At what point is my fandom idolatrous? Am I letting sports ruin my night? If it's Saturday night in the fall and you're a big LSU Tigers fan and LSU's at home and it's a big game and here Auburn's coming to town and Auburn's not ranked and LSU's in the top 10, oops, Auburn comes in there and beats you. Do you get mad? Do you cuss? Do you break stuff? Do you punch the wall? Do you ignore your wife and children? Do you kick the dog? Do you wake up the next morning still negatively impacted by how you were acting the previous day because a team that you wanted to win didn't win? Do you skip church because you're too mad about what happened the previous night? You're watching the Super Bowl and you put a little bit of money on it and you're getting after your friends and you're for sure your team's going to win because, it's Patty Mahomes. We got the power of Taylor Swift going. Whoops, Philadelphia Eagles show up and pee on that parade. And it's like, and you just can't function for a few days because you're such a big Kansas City Chiefs fan. Well, whatever your situation is, you need to reckon with that incredibly blurry line between fandom and idolatry. And if you're on the side of idolatry, you need to fix it. All right, guys, that'll do it for today. Before we go, we are going to do a quick resilience boost. At Undaunted.Life, our mission is equipping men to push back darkness with content that forges spiritual and mental resilience. Don't forget, we are a donation-based ministry. The donation link is there in the show notes. And also, subscribe to Daily Wire Plus. Become an all-access member. The code is there in the show notes. Use the promo code Kyle30 to get 30% off of your subscription. Again, the code is Kyle30. The website is getdwplus.com/undaunted. That's getdwplus.com/undaunted. And then I've got all the links for everything that I talked about in the quick hitters. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a positive 5-star review. If you want me to come speak live at your event or on your podcast, just shoot me an email to info@Undaunted.Life. That's info@Undaunted.Life. Follow us on Instagram and like us on Facebook, and check out our website for everything else, including how to donate to keep more content like this coming your way. Just go to www.Undaunted.Life. And as always, we want to thank the band Holy Name for allowing us to use their music for our content. The music on this podcast is their song Perpetua, which is off their self-titled debut album on Face Down Records. The links are in the description. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Remember, keep pushing back darkness, keep forging spiritual, mental, and physical resilience, keep seeking the Lion of Judah.